there's quite a big draw for crystal healing right now among the Malay community as well. So when I first started, usually my Malay clients were very like much when they go past my little booth and they're like, oh, okay, let's do a love card reading. So they're very much into like maybe where they are at.
Hello?
Hai, kita ada kontak seorang modern witch tau.
Tukang tilik. You serius ke?
Khidmat Nara bermula secara hobi di pasar seni dan kemudiannya secara online melalui lelaman My Grandmama's Secret. Semakin ramai anak-anak Melayu yang mendapatkan ramalan daripada kad dan astrologi. Tim Taboo ingin mencari tahu tentang cara perubatan ini.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Nara.
Welcome to my home, Farisha.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. This way in.
Thank you.
Alright, so this is basically my little setup. So I sleep upstairs. So this is kind of also, in a way, I do not want to rest where I'm working.
Okay.
So long ago, I used to have my bed below and my workspace was here and I was draining a lot of energy. So that's why I think this kind of worked out. For me, I like to use a lot of energetic influence. So this is actually an obsidian mirror. So you use this to actually like gaze into it to just get intuitive message. And then this whole collections are my different books that I actually study. So we talk a bit about ancient Egypt. I have all this stuff, like this is a complete book of the Book of the Dead. This is actually King Cobra shed. So it's a real shed. I got it from a very good friend, very ethical. So the whole idea of snake sheds is that it actually gives you the whole idea of rebirth because you're shedding away the old. This is actually my little altar space. I've been carrying her since my first booth, like my first event out. Yeah, so I still carry her around whenever I go out for readings. And if you're wondering what is this little thing, these are just basically offerings whereby it's just honey. Yeah, so to me, I always believe that whenever they help you, you're supposed to give them back something. Yeah, so usually honey, water. Yeah, and then I like working with spiritual animals. So this is actually like how my animal guide looks like, which is actually a black panther. So I found this panther in Hong Kong and I bought it. So it's very like idealized, like my whole altar is quite idealized-y. Okay, so talking about energy, right? For me, because I come from a very Hindu background, I like the whole idea of idealizing. Like you look at what you're creating and then which are the gods helping you. But the whole idea of energy, that it can also be an intention and a whole belief of the universe.
Nara, could you maybe tell us how long you've been doing this line of work?
My grandmother came from a very ritualistic perspective. So there was a lot of belief of spiritual possessions and things like that.
Okay.
And then they usually would help to remove the whole idea. So growing up with such perspective already put me in a space whereby I'm quite open to it.
So you mentioned that you sort of got the influence from your grandmother, right? But when did you sort of start learning, I guess, the technicalities of it, of the witchcraft?
How to put it? Okay, the technicality part is kind of interesting. So Hinduism has kind of a lot of corresponding belief system with paganism. So for me, when I was very young, right, my dad doesn't like us watching cartoon. So he always would turn on Discovery Channel. And Discovery Channel at those times was all about ancient Egypt. So what happened during that time is that I was so young, almost like 4 or 5 years old, I'm watching these ancient Egypt shows and I was just so fascinated because I'm like, wow, this is so mysterious.
Yeah.
While growing up, right, so I was already very open to the concept of paganism.
Okay.
So it was very natural for me to already like pick and match like my belief system, what I'm watching people do, and then this very intrigued belief system. And then as I got older, I started doing a lot of study myself and also cross-referencing with my culture.
So earlier you were talking about how you merge your different influences. That's what made you sort of different, right? So would you say that that's why you would call yourself like a modern witch? Is that what makes you modern?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's how I termed myself a modern witch. So I know witch generally have a very negative outlook to it because they're always associated with someone who's doing bad and evil. So because my belief concept is kind of a bit more different, for me, like when the whole idea of witch came about, it was very much to also shake society a bit, just to educate people that, hey, actually, you know, the whole idea of witches is just an empowered women. So it's just using that whole idea of power into helping people. So initially when I started, like what I've seen my grandmother do and all that, it's very different.
Okay.
They think that something is wrong with their family member, they bring them over, and then it's just done in a closed room, right? Like how they help them is done in the closed room.
Okay.
But now what happened is that because it's a very modern thing, you can't associate all these things into like, okay, you're just going to drink this holy water and you're going to feel fine. Like people are already coming out of such belief system and they'll be like, okay, how is even holy water made?
Okay, yeah.
So now I'm learning that what I'm educating people is the fundamentals of how you actually associate positivity into your life, which is where the modern aspect comes to it.
So could you maybe share with us, what kind of services you provide?
So for me, the most important and the one that I always do and people usually come to me for is divination services. So divination services is basically a more modern way to like fortune telling and all that. And then that misconcept just turned into fortune telling equals to a bad thing. Because they think that the concept of being able to predict something comes from a darker source. So what I usually do is that I calculate their date of birth, which gives me a single digit number. So this is basically a very basic form of numerology. So because I understand where they are at their current year or the current transition, it kind of gives me a bit of a rough idea of where they need to work on. Taking that further, what I do is that I also craft for people mojo bags, whereby I actually craft little those drawstring bags, or even I sometimes sew it down with crystals and herbs and quite a few like healing oil blends. So, and then I usually fuse it with Reiki. Reiki is just a form of energy healing whereby you're just infusing it with flowing positive energy. Apart from this, what I usually also do for my clients that I do animal communication, whereby I telepathically connect to their pets and actually give them a bit of an idea of what is happening or maybe correct behaviors as well.
So typically, Nara, who are your customers and what do they approach you for?
So initially, when I started off in the art market, I get very young girls, usually concerned about their relationship. But obviously over the years, I feel like it has changed. Especially during the pandemic right now, I think many people are feeling very unsure and they usually come to me like for guidance. And this is through like a soul and a life purpose reading, whereby I actually help people to kind of merge where they are, what are their fears, and what is it that they can move forward with. So for my Malay customers, they're pretty cute. So most of them usually come to me for their cats, whereby it's usually animal communication that is very, very hot for them. Like they usually want to understand their cats and how they can, coexist with them and what are their thought processes. And I also realized that there's quite a big draw for crystal healing right now among the Malay community as well. So I do get a couple of clients who actually would like me to craft them a little mojo bag. And this is based off like where they are at. So when I first started, usually my Malay clients were very like much when they go past my little booth and they are like, oh, okay, let's do a love card reading. So they are very much into like maybe where they are at. But then right now, I feel like they are also coming into a bit more of that idea of, maybe combining a bit more crystals, a bit more healing.
Aisyah bekerja sepenuh masa dan sudah berumah tangga. Dia telah mendapatkan khidmat divination reading dan animal communication sejak beberapa tahun yang lalu.
So let's see what the cards are saying now.
Saya ingin lihat sendiri bagaimana Nara menjalankan khidmatnya membaca cakra seseorang.
This card usually represents like really tapping back into your intuition, and then it's also root chakra.
Bagaimana khidmat itu bermanfaat bagi Aisyah?
For this, I actually use animal communications, and through the animal communications, actually I found out that the one that bully is very jealous of the other one because he gets more attention. Animal communicators can help to kind of assess what the cat is seeing and experiencing, and in that sense narrow down where the cat could be. And there are instances where it has helped to locate the missing cat. Actually, saya like use a very myriad of ways to actually get to know myself. So I'm quite experimental in that sense. I don't know how you say it, but I do macam I also personally study guidance and counselling, so I do follow like that kind of aspects and thinkings as well, and that way of actually growing as a person. Bukannya saya lebih selesa dengan cara ini, cuma saya suka mendapat pendapat dari cara-cara yang berbeza. So saya juga ikut pendapat kaunselor, asatizah and all this. Saya ikut diorang regularly on social media and things like that. So saya cuba campur aduk semua all the guidance and apply it to myself.
Adakah Aisyah percayakan pakar ini sepenuhnya?
Okay. I would say that it works for me. It works for me to understand myself spiritually. And whether or not it may work for other people, I think that's for them to explore and decide for themselves.
Yeah. So there is a certain rule and a certain way to do it. Like you can't just go around and like predicting future.
Tak kisah dia bilang yang dia hanya untuk mengenal kepribadian seseorang, mengenali kepribadian. Dia bukan masalah itu. Masalah adalah ketika seseorang itu menilik, maka itu termasuk daripada perbuatan haram. Dan ada hadis Nabi SAW yang melarang kita untuk pergi ke tempat-tempat yang seperti ini. Kerana apa? Kerana dia takut akan menjejaskan kita punya akidah, kita punya kepercayaan kita pada Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. Nak cakap tentang niat, sebagaimana tadi saya dengar katanya nak menjadi orang yang baik, maknanya itu upgrade diri dia. Betul, memang dalam Islam memang perlu kita upgrade diri kita. Akan tetapi cara kita seperti tadi itu saya dengar, maknanya dia pergi ke orang ini untuk dia tahu tentang dirinya, baru dia nak upgrade. Sebetulnya yang tahu tentang diri kita hanya diri kita sahaja. Keaiban kita, kekurangan kita, kelebihan kita, hanya kita yang tahu dan tak ada orang lain yang tahu. Kalau orang lain dapat tahu keadaan kita, kalau orang lain dapat tahu apa yang kita lalui, apa kekurangan kita, itu bukan bermaknanya orang itu lebih tahu mana yang sesuai bagi kita, jalan yang mana sesuai bagi kita. Unless kalau kita cakap tentang counselling, mereka belajar tentang kepribadian kita, kita punya karakter, cara kita berjalan, cara kita berbual, cara kita pandang mata orang lain. Itu semua ada dia punya ilmu-ilmu tertentu. Bukan itu maksud saya. Tapi maksud saya adalah ketika mereka baca kepribadian, maknanya daripada energi-energi tertentu, maka itu sebetulnya tak diperbolehkan dalam Islam. Tapi ketika melihat sesuatu yang gaib ataupun komunikasi dengan cara-cara tertentu, maka tidak diperbolehkan juga. Jadi seperti itu. Ya, jadi faham maksudnya. Kalau untuk cara seperti ini, sebaiknya kita tanya diri kita, kita kembali pada Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, kita minta nasihat daripada mak bapak kita dan juga orang-orang yang sebetulnya mempunyai ilmu, pakar dalam bidang tersebut. Ketika kita minta pertolongan kepada orang lain, kita cari yang pakar. Dan yang pakar ni bukan yang sembarang pakar, tapi kalau boleh yang bertauliah.
Ada tak rasa perbuatan ini bercanggah dengan agama?
Okay. I think this is like to each his own. But for me, I go in with the intention, the niat that this is just for my well-being. I have no intention towards other people or anything like that. And it's all for me to go spiritually. So I believe at the core of everything, right, is all about us and ourselves and our spirituality. And when we get to know ourselves, we have to, like, coming back to God is coming back to your own spirituality. That's what I feel.
It's funny because sometimes I'm starting to feel like maybe what I do is therapy-ish as well, and also there's some form of counselling as well. And I think that it's modern only because I'm not prescribing any form of medication. But what I'm doing is that I actually assign them affirmations. I assign them like thought processes to think about. I suggest even journaling and things like that. So I realized that I actually suggest methods that help them to feel better. So that is very therapy-ish, but it's not that they always have to come and see me, whereby it's more like, okay, we do a reading, this is your process, this is what you need to do, and then you work on it.
Adakah Aisyah rasa selesa mendapatkan khidmat ini?
Ya, saya rasa selesa mendapatkan khidmat ni. I think another thing is because I don't think it's anyone's position to say or judge or say this is right, this is wrong in another person's journey to themselves. So I don't feel the need to explain to anyone. Yeah.
So are the visual cards actually spells?
The whole idea of tarot cards is that you have different cards that represents different life junctures that you go through. So it starts from your major arcanas to your minor arcanas. So basically when you draw these cards, you are just identifying to people the different aspects they are in. Likewise with oracle cards. So these cards are just a perspective of where you are at. Like it doesn't connect to any form of religion or anything like that. It's just like, okay, this is what is happening. Okay, I draw the cards. Oh look, this is what is happening. So it's just to help people have a visual idea of what is it that they are going through. So they are just a little guidance. They don't represent or affirm anything even, yeah.
You sort of are predicting the future by sort of understanding where the person is at and seeing where they will go. And then, no, that's wrong.
Ish because, how I look at it is that what I try to do is that I would try to understand what is the future they want to create. So because that is what they want to create, I tune them back to the present to go towards that.
Okay.
So I think that is the way that usually it is, but because of misconception. So we also have rules whereby when you're doing a divination services, like you cannot predict death, you can't tell people things like that.
And then, so you were talking about, helping your customers with their energy as well. But then you also mentioned earlier about their mental perspective. So I'm just curious, when we're talking about mental perspective, are you certified in counseling or maybe psychology?
Not really.
Okay, so you're coming from like this,
I come from a spiritual perspective, but I did take a psychology course for a year. So what happened with my psychology course is that because I was working and trying to do it in between, I was really young. I couldn't finish it because I couldn't afford for it. But another funny thing is that in my job, I actually am an animal trainer. So I actually blend in a lot of conditioning techniques with people, which actually helps animals. It's almost similar. And on my own, I actually do a lot of studying. Like I take on like a lot of initiative to actually go and read up and understand the different perspective and all that. So I think until now, I'm still learning.
Have you ever experienced customers who maybe found that it is in contrast to their religion?
Basically, this book, 5,000 Book of Spells. So this book has all sorts of spells all around the world in it. So when you flip through, it actually adds in. So I actually read through like a few Quran spells that they just tell you which verse to use and what to do with the herbs and all that. But when I heard this lady's story, I recommended this. I'm like, oh, why don't you seal your area and you protect and you do an energetic bath? What I told her is that you come back to your space. This is my favorite stuff.
Oh.
So I love oud. Like I love this so much because it's so energetically clearing. So I recommended this. I'm like, I don't know why you people don't use this, but this is fantastic. So basically, like you cleanse your space. Once you have cleansed your space, what you need to do is like basically tell whatever energy that you don't feel resonating with. Just say that you come in peace and you want them to go off in peace. Because your intention is that you want to be in a peaceful setting. And then you can actually go into a Quran verse that actually supports that. And if you maybe cannot say it properly, you can always find, those recordings that you can just play and you can actually just play it in your living space. So what happened with her is that she's already seen a spiritualist that helped her with it. So this lady actually offered her lemons and did prayer and all that. But what happened is that when they come back home, they didn't upkeep that energy. So what I helped her do is that, hey, don't worry, everything is good, you just have to continue the energy. Which comes back down to her religious faith, right? And then my recommendation was that, you just take salt, like, you can pray over salt, you put it at the door. Because my belief system is that you must always guard the doorway.
Bagaimana pandangan Islam tentang cara perubatan begini?
Wow. Okey, biasanya kalau seseorang itu mempunyai gangguan dalam rumah, kebanyakannya masalah adalah datang daripada kepribadian masing-masing. Mana individual orang yang tinggal dalam rumah tersebut. Jadi contohnya kalau seorang itu panggil saya untuk so-called ruqyahkan rumah, maka saya akan hadirkan ahli rumah, ahli keluarga yang duduk dalam rumah tersebut untuk saya bacakan ruqyah. Kemungkinan besar gangguan tersebut datang daripada individu yang ada kat dalam. So that's the first thing. Then secondly, tentang yang tadi ada 5,000 spells kan. Memang buku-buku seperti ini memang ada. Banyak sekali di luar. Even saya pun ada juga buku-buku sihir yang saya simpan untuk kita belajar to counter back. Saya macam still tak boleh percaya. Allah. Macam tadi ada mandi dengan air, kemudian garam. Apakah ia betul? Apakah ada dalam ajaran Islam? Yes, betul. Memang ada yang disyariatkan dalam Islam. Dia punya garam tu is just to neutralize dia punya diri. Itu saja. Dan yang disarankan adalah lebih kepada Himalayan salt. Disebabkan Himalayan salt mempunyai khasiat-khasiat tertentu. Kalau if you can do research atau you Google up, memang ada dia punya khasiat-khasiat tertentu. Jadi dia akan menambahkan lagi khasiatnya dibandingkan bersama dengan air yang sudah dibacakan, yang sudah diruqyahkan dan juga dengan daun bidara. Kemudian ada satu lagi yang tadi yang menarik perhatian saya adalah maknanya kita buat peace with them yang ada kat dalam rumah untuk mereka pergi dan ditambahkan lagi dengan ayat Al-Quran. Sebetulnya kita tak ada buat any peace. Kalau untuk agama Islam, tak ada peace. Ada sebahagian orang dipanggil sema. Sema kalau kita buka kamus Melayu, sema adalah memberikan makanan ataupun sajian. Can be pisang, can be ayam, can be daging, kacang, anggur dan lain-lainnya. Disajikan bagi mereka. Di antara syarat-syaratnya, ambil ni, keluar. Jadi, apakah kata semah tu ada dalam ruqyah syariah yang diajarkan oleh Nabi SAW ataupun para sahabat ataupun ulama-ulama ruqyah? Tak. Jadi, semah perlu kita gantikan dengan kata ruqyah. Ruqyah dalam bahasa Arab, diambil kata roqa. Roqa tu maknanya jampi-jampi ataupun mentera-mentera. Nah, mentera di sini ada mentera-mentera yang berdasarkan Islam, ada yang mentera-mentera yang tak berdasarkan Islam. Kemudian ada lagi dikatakan pasal rumah untuk letakkan garam. Kemudian memang ada sebetulnya beberapa daripada masyarakat kita masih lagi amalkan seperti itu, iaitu dia akan letakkan garam ataupun air dicampur dengan garam, diletakkan kemudian untuk protect. Tapi sebetulnya dalam ruqyah syariah yang syariat Islam tak ada unsur seperti itu. Tetapi kalau untuk perubatan Melayu, yes ada. Sebab apa? Dikatakan bukan untuk protect tapi untuk detect, lebih tepatnya. To detect. Sebab apa? Mereka mengatakan bahawasanya jin itu terbuat daripada luapan api. So bukan dari api the itself, tapi yang bahagian atas tu, yang bahagian panas tu. Kadang-kadang kalau kita nampak ada api atas tu macam very so-called macam transparent tapi blur. Benda itu yang jin tu adalah daripada situ. Maka ketika luapan api ataupun benda yang panas bercampur dengan garam, maka garam akan cair. Maka sebab itu mereka selalu letak di hujung-hujung ataupun di penjuru-penjuru. Ketika mereka nampak, ada garam yang cair, maknanya ada sesuatu yang panas yang ada di persekitaran tersebut. Cuma kadang-kadang saya tengok ada orang letak garam 3 hari, ada yang letak 5 hari, ada yang letak seminggu, ada sebulan pun ada letak. Kadang-kadang tengok, you have to see first. keadaan rumah macam mana. Ada rumah ada orang ada aircon. Ada rumah tak ada aircon. Ada orang yang dia punya west sun. Maknanya dia punya ketika terbenam matahari tu facing dia punya wall. Of course will be hot. Dan ketika you letak dalam keadaan panas, dan Singapura sekarang Masya Allah 35, 36 kan, bukan main-main. Ditambah lagi dengan garam. Garam pun boleh sedih, garam pun cair. Kan? Jadi you have to take note that tak semua keadaan seperti ini yang you boleh tahu yang jin ni ada dalam rumah.
Masyarakat Melayu Islam akan terus-menerus terdedah dengan ahli tukang tilik dan cara perubatan alternatif dalam kehidupan berbilang bangsa. Namun, kita juga dinasihatkan agar berhati-hati dalam mencari jalan penyelesaian.
Jadi pertama sekali adalah perbetulkan prinsip. Kenali prinsip yang apa yang kita ambil sebagai orang Muslim. Kemudian yang kedua, apa yang diperintahkan oleh Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala dan apa yang Allah larang perlu kita lakukan, perlu kita jauhi. The first thing is ketika seorang itu do it for fun ataupun kita panggil sebagai try nasib ke, just nak try for fun, curious. Perkara yang haram tetap haram. Dan perkara yang haram ni dia sebetulnya dalam Islam ada dia punya kesan buruknya setelah itu. Dari situ dia akan terus menjejaskan akidah kita. Itu yang sebetulnya bahaya. Start daripada apa? Start daripada try dulu.